Alright guys, if you've seen this before, we're doing something new today. Gonna try something out. Like I said, trial everywhere. Waiting for people to join. Live on both streams. We are alright. So going to, for those of you live, those of you later, we're gonna try out a little exercise coming home from work, usually around this time. Today I'm just sick, so I just woke up from a nap a little bit ago. So same kind of feel, late night, light exercise, light stretching, getting done, trying to, get the body ready to go to bed, but I'm not exactly gonna be falling asleep in the near future. So we'll exercise, then we'll sit back down and do some politics. But to start, we got a couple NPR episodes to listen to while I stretch out, and we can maybe go over and talk about. I'm going to sit close and burn one down while we make sure that the volume looks good on this. Anybody joining can please let me know. I haven't gone micless in a little while. I think it sounds good. All right. I'm going to check with my moderators, see if they're on. And then we will. All right. Let's go to NPR, see how this sounds, looks, and then from there, I guess I could try. No, it's way too fucking late at night to be doing speakers. Just from the phone, and then we'll see how that sounds while I blaze, and then I'll let everybody know I will be drinking a little light pre-workout. This is going to be a vegan workout drink. That's gone now. Vegan, keto friendly, good stuff here. Amino lean. So I only do one scoop instead of two this late at night, so that I am not all jacked up, staying up till 5, 6 in the morning. If I do a proper light workout, proper stretch, I should still be able to fall asleep by 3:34, which is kind of my standard bartending, go to bed night, 3:34, wake up by 10, 10:30. And so yeah, we got the vegan, keto-friendly pre-shrink. We'll start drinking that while we blaze, wait for a few people to join. I'm going to start out, I think we're going to start out and kind of work our way into politics. So we'll start out with the anxiety episode. Good one to start stretching, do a little yoga to anxiety episode, right? From there, we'll do the crypto episode, see what NPR has to say about crypto, and see what my opinions are towards that. And then the third episode I wanted to do was a Senate overview of some Senate incumbent Senate seats that are up for debate this year. So all interesting to me, all good stuff. And after that, we'll sit down and do a normal Stony Progressive episode, I think. But for first half, we're going to do a health and fitness. So let's try this out.
Life Kit is like your friend with really good advice.
So, can I really be truthful? It's just me and you, right?
Well, sure. Let's say it is.
3 times a week, Life Kit is in your feeds with episodes on health, personal finance, personal growth, and so much more. Listen to Life Kit from NPR.
I have suffered from anxiety for much of my life, and my daughter has anxiety, also some ADHD issues. And I think after 2 years or so of wearing the mask and not at all being anti-maskers or anti-vaxxers, we're just really looking forward to being able to literally and figuratively breathe a little bit.
Many of us know what it feels like to have anxiety, even if we don't call it that.
It may feel like a tightness in your chest or an overwhelming fear of something that is yet to happen. And it's no surprise that the pandemic has made this overwhelming fear worse. According to the CDC, adults experiencing symptoms of anxiety or depressive disorder grew more than 5% between 2020 and 2021. We're now entering into a new phase of the pandemic as some states start to loosen their mask mandates. For some people, like the voicemail we heard at the opening of the show, the change is a welcome one. But for others, lax or mask guidance is one of the things causing them anxiety. Anna says, quote, "I'm anxious about changing COVID guidances because my child still cannot receive a vaccine. I don't know how many different ways to explain this to other people. I have a 3-year-old who cannot be vaccinated. That means I, as her parent, working in an office environment and with another older sibling going to school, have to do my best to protect her." Currently, CDC guidance still says you should wear a mask indoors in public. For this installment of the Scientific Method, we're talking about anxiety and the science behind it. We'll get into all that and more after the break. I'm Jen White. You're listening to the 1A podcast, where we get to the heart of the story. A reminder to have your questions answered on future topics, or just to let us know what you think. Tweet us at 1A.
Support for NPR and the following message come from Upwork, where you can build the team that will build your business. With Upwork, you can find top developers, designers, project managers, and more who can start today so your business can succeed tomorrow. Find talent at home. Online counseling can be to have a healthy relationship with someone. To get matched with a counselor within 48 hours and save 10%, go to why this whole time is so difficult. The connection that happens between people can be very powerful, and how healing it can be to have a healthy relationship with someone. To get matched with a counselor within 48 hours and save 10%, go to how they do it. Listen to the Planet Money podcast from NPR. Over this last year and a half, the world's been through a lot. So on this season of the StoryCorps podcast, we'll hear stories reminding us that even when times are hard, we can still begin again. Listen to our new season wherever you get your podcasts.
We're discussing anxiety and the science behind it for this installment of the Scientific Method. Joining us for this discussion is Dr. Judson Brewer. He's a psychiatrist, neuroscientist, and executive medical director at ShareCare. That's a health and wellness platform. He's also the author of Unwinding Anxiety. New science shows how to break the cycles of worry and fear to heal your mind. Judd, it's great to have you back.
Thanks for having me.
Also with us is Joseph Ledoux. He's a professor of neuroscience and psychology at NYU and director of the Emotional Brain Institute at NYU. He's also the author of Anxious, Using the Brain to Understand and Treat Fear and Anxiety. Joseph, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So, Jet, let's just start with a basic question. What is anxiety?
Yeah, so we can think of some of the basic definitions, like a feeling of nervousness, worry, or unease about an imminent event or something with an uncertain outcome. But I think, as you put in a little bit earlier, simply put, I think of it as fear of the future.
Joseph, what's happening in our brain when we start to feel anxious?
Well, it depends on what we mean by anxiety, and there are lots of ways to talk about that. My particular approach is to think about it in terms of the subjective experience of the anxious person. There's certainly a lot of physiology going on, and you're hyper aroused and so forth in many cases. But ultimately, it comes down to the subjective experience of the patient and how they are interpreting their environment. And I think that this has been lost in the shuffle of treatment over the years.
For those of us without neuroscience background, Joseph, break down the parts of the brain that deal with anxiety and what they do, starting with the amygdala.
Well, the amygdala has this idea, people have this idea of the amygdala as the brain's fear center. And it would take me a long time to explain everything about that, but that I think is absolutely wrong. What the amygdala does is detects and responds to danger. And that allows your brain to, in a kind of unconscious way, to detect things that you've learned about as being dangerous and to organize your behavioral response to a dangerous situation. Part of that will be metabolic support, so your heart will be beating faster, stress hormones will be released, and all of this is part of a natural process of allowing you to cognitively understand what's going on in your life. Now, when that cognitive process turns into unmitigated worry, that's when you have a problem with anxiety that is not normal or healthy anxiety, which is a perfectly good thing to have, but a kind of pathological anxiety. And I think that part is more of a cognitive interpretation involving the highest centers of the cortex.
Now, Judd, what function does anxiety play in human life? What purpose does it serve?
Well, I think there are two very clear survival mechanisms that our brains have. One is this fear response, as Joseph was talking about, where if there's immediate danger, we respond. Another is, think of the prefrontal cortex as being involved in thinking and planning. So planning for the future, also helpful for survival in a different way. But when you mush those two together, fear of the future doesn't actually help us survive all that well, because it makes it harder for us to think and plan.
Well, we spoke to author and research professor Brene Brown last year about the scope of emotions we experience. And here's what she had to say about anxiety.
Most of us face anxiety sometimes on, a daily basis, but there's kind of the normal kind of anxiety that we're up against us as humans living in a complex, difficult world. Then there's the kind of anxiety that really prevents us from engaging in everyday behaviors. And that kind of anxiety, kind of a general anxiety disorder, we need professional help.
That's Brene Brown on 1A. You can find that full conversation at the1a.org. Judd, how do you know the difference between low-level anxiety and clinical anxiety that may require professional attention?
Yeah, so I think Brene talked about that a little bit, where if it's really getting in the way of what we're doing, if we think of the psychiatric Bible, the DSM, they talk about, causing significant interference in our daily lives, whether it's our personal life, our work life, our relationships, etc. So when something is really getting in the way, anxiety or otherwise, that can be an indication, that we could seek some help.
Joseph, what about for you? Anything to add?
No, I think that pretty much summarizes it. I mean, I guess what I would say is that, the word anxiety, when it appears with anxiety disorders as a diagnosis, is a very wide range of conditions. But what we seem to be talking about primarily here, and I think that's totally appropriate, is this generalized anxiety. But there are other conditions that anxiety is a part of. For example, phobias and PTSD, and maybe Judson has some other things to throw in, and he's probably familiar with all that than me.
Judge, jump in here.
I'm just thinking I would add to the list social anxiety, even agoraphobia, fear of public places. The list can go on and on, for sure.
Well, if you or someone you know is experiencing anxiety, you can always call the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services hotline at 1-800-662-4357. That's 1-800-662-HELP. You can call and get information on local treatment options. Now, Joseph, as we mentioned earlier, several states, including California, New York, and Nevada, have recently loosened their mask guidance. How does anxiety intersect with change, especially in times of uncertainty?
Well, I'll just jump in and say that, with our brains really don't like change. That's what uncertainty is all about. It says, hey, you don't know what's happening, go get some information. And that uncertainty, whether it's loosening or changing or doing whatever, makes us start to go into worry mode, where we start to wonder, hey, is there actual danger here? And that can then spin out into fear of the future, and that's where we get anxious.
Now, Jeff, throughout the pandemic, even though there has been guidance from authoritative agencies like the CDC, many day-to-day decisions around safety have fallen on individuals. So when we think about the fact that anxiety impacts our ability to make decisions, I mean, how difficult does it make it for us to continue to live through a pandemic when so many of those choices are just up to us?
Yeah. So here's the irony. We have to become the experts, and there's a ton of information out there, more than we've ever had access to before. And so just that sheer volume of information can be overwhelming. Just the sheer number of suggestions that we can get in terms of how to maintain safety can be overwhelming. And then you add to all of that, maybe some of the information isn't accurate if we get it on social media, or whatnot, and then we have to sort through all of that as well. So that can add up pretty darn quickly.
Judd, over 40 million adults in the U.S. have an anxiety disorder. That's nearly 20% of American adults, according to the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Why is anxiety specifically so widespread in this country?
I think particularly now, where we've seen a spike over the last 2 years, we've seen wave upon wave of uncertainty. And I don't need to detail all of the ways we can do this, but it ranges from health and safety to economic, to schools, to even constantly changing recommendations.
Joseph, I want to circle back to the question of anxiety and decision making. Some of your early research involved looking at how our brains explain our actions to us through a narrative it creates. What is this phenomenon?
Well, it's been said many times that humans are narrative animals, and we basically narrate our lives, and that's how we come to understand what's really on our mind, in a way that certainly our mind is generating some of our behavior. But a lot of our behavior comes from systems that operate unconsciously. And as organisms that believe that we have free will, and most people kind of believe that, regardless of what some scientists might say, we all kind of deep down believe we have free will. And so it's disturbing that if our body is producing a response that our conscious mind didn't choose, that is something we need to cope with. And we generate these narratives to reduce the cognitive dissonance, the upsetness that results from simply observing these kinds of non-consciously controlled behavior. So our narrations are part of what allows our conscious mind to at least fool itself into thinking that it's in control of the world.
So can you give us an example, perhaps a pandemic-related example of what that might look like in action?
Well, yeah, so you go into, you say, okay, I've got to go shopping. So your current narrative of shopping, as you mentioned a minute ago, is that, you want to get in and out very quickly, or one might want to get in and out. So that's a narrative that has been generated for you to make sense of the fact that, you might be exposed to something and you want to get out. So these are just stories that we create, we create what's called a schema. That's a body of information that conceptualizes situations for us. So, and the narrative we produce with these schema is what defines how we think about a situation, whether it's a political situation or a dangerous situation in a forest, or a dangerous situation with things you can't see, like viruses.
So what happens when the brain needs a story for our actions, but it doesn't have one, or it can't latch onto one?
Well, that's the thing about the brain, at least the human brain and its capacities, cognitive capacities. Narration is just an automatic, natural thing. We are constantly just telling our story to ourselves and to others. And it's not something that you have to worry about how to do. You just do it.
Judd, how much of non-clinical anxiety is the story we tell ourselves about what could happen?
That's a great question. So I would say, if we break down anxiety, there are two pieces that kind of feed on each other. One is that feeling of anxiety, and that often that feeling comes up. I'm thinking of my patients who wake up in the morning with anxiety, and it's the feeling that kind of triggers them to start to worry. And so that's that other piece where they're worrying, and I think that's where the narration comes in quite a bit. And I think that's very, very common, as Joseph's talking about.
So Joseph, what does research say about our ability to change these stories? As you said, we're always writing these stories for ourselves. We're narrating our lives. But if they're being created in our brains subconsciously, how much control do we have over those stories and our ability to change them?
Well, it's the difference between subconscious and preconscious. The narratives are well, let's put it this way. Every conscious thought you have is preceded by unconscious information. So the thought of the last fraction has been completed into something. That's Freudian unconscious. Everything have conscious access to most of the brain does, but how it is. And the good news, I think, is because so much of it is about the narratives that we generate, all we have to do is really change the narrative. I mean, I know that sounds, like kind of trite and simple, but to an extent it's true. The problem is that we over rely on things like medications in the sense that they will change narratives when that's not possible. I don't think there's any way you could take a pill that goes into your mouth, it goes into your digestive system, enters your bloodstream, goes throughout your body, ultimately reaches your brain, finds just the right area to make you feel better. How is that possible? And that's why the drugs are so disappointing to the drug companies, that they're getting out of the business. It's not that some drugs don't help some people, but they're targeting the wrong thing. They're designed in animal research to target areas like the amygdala, which you mentioned earlier. But the amygdala is not where these narratives, where the conscious understanding of the situation you're in and the feelings that you generate from all this come about. So we have to find a different way. It's not that the drugs aren't useful for turning down the volume of the state. So, you go to a restaurant, the music is too loud, some awful heavy metal thing that you may not like. You ask them to turn it down. It's still the same song you don't like, but it's not as irritating. And I think that's what drugs can help with, is to kind of lower the volume more so than to change the mental state.
Joseph, why do you think the medical and neuroscience communities historically have been preoccupied with the behavior of a patient and not that emotional state you're describing?
Well, it comes down to throughout much of the 20th century, psychology was controlled by behaviorists who focused on behavior and didn't care much about conscious states and so forth. And when the pharmaceutical industry took off in terms of psychotropic medications, who was doing the behavioral studies but behaviors? And the first kind of non-dynamic, non-Freudian psychotherapy, in a way, not the first, but the kind that really became popular was behavioral therapy, which led to cognitive behavioral, which led to cognitive. So there's a whole history of behavioral influence. And if you're a therapist, you need metrics, objective metrics that you can check off on a list in order for the patient to be reimbursed. I mean, I'm not a therapist, so I really am talking out of my hat here, so to speak. But maybe Judd can say something about that. Do you agree that the checklist is looking for objective things, but the problem is the patient feels bad and they need to be subjectively feeling better in order to actually feel treated?
Judd, go ahead.
I 100% agree. Yeah, 100% agree.
So how do you deal with that then from a therapeutic standpoint, Judd, when you have a patient who is struggling and they want to feel better, but perhaps the pathway to feeling better is longer than they may want?
Yes. Well, I think there's some irony here. So, the behaviorists, as Joseph was talking about, made let's just say there's some complexity here, and we're trying to figure that out. But if you look at if you start to bring the subjective and the objective behavior together, and you think of worry, for example, as a behavior, as a mental behavior, then something interesting starts to emerge. And back in the 1980s, Thomas Borkovec and others suggested that anxiety could actually be driven like a habit through negative reinforcement, in the same way that behaviorists were talking about, behaviors being reinforced. And when we started looking at that, my lab started looking at that, we actually developed an app called Unwinding Anxiety to test to see if we could actually target that, where we would help people change their relationship to their thoughts rather than trying to change their thoughts themselves. So a different approach than a cognitive therapy, change the cognition, but really an approach where we change our relationship to our cognitions itself. So we kind of bring in this behaviorist approach in a mental way to see if we can then affect anxiety really at a mechanistic level.
Here's an email we got from Al, who says, I have generalized anxiety. I think one thing that people maybe don't understand is when I have an episode, I don't worry about a particular thing or topic. I just feel anxious. It's like a low-level electrical current buzzing through me. A higher level of current is more like a panic attack. Maybe it's not well understood because those without anxiety can only relate to worrying about something. Judson, does that resonate with what you hear from some of your patients?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm guessing most, if not all of us, can resonate with that low level buzzing of one way or another, whether it's, it's all day where with people with generalized anxiety, or just situational, or at a certain time where it just pops up on its own. And here too, we can look to see, what's our natural reaction to something that's unpleasant. Well, our brain says, hey, this doesn't feel good, make it go away. And so we tend to avoid, or we can even get in unhealthy relationships to the feeling of anxiety itself. Yet if we can start to change our relationship to it and start to bring in, I think of the mental behavior of curiosity, this might be a way to start to work with that root feeling itself.
We're talking about the science behind anxiety. We'll continue our conversation.
As one of those 40 million people who suffer from anxiety, I have to say that a lot of that was on point. They were, they kept speculating, so it's always interesting to me that they, if not one of the people that are talking are actually somebody that's suffering from it and just intelligent enough to talk about it, but they always have to get experts that have no fucking actual personal experience. But anywho, yeah, they were right. I mean, when you have a panic day, when you have an anxiety day, you don't have anxiety about one thing. You have anxiety about 20 things. Like I am currently being OCD right now. Anyhow, so yeah, that's absolutely the situation, and I think I got that low enough that me and the puppy can be seen. I'll do some floor stuff. Let's keep going.
After the break. And remember to join future conversations, download our 1A Vox Pop app, and leave us a voicemail.
This message comes from NPR sponsor ExxonMobil, who is committed to reducing emissions from its operated assets in support of a net zero future. Advancing climate solutions like carbon capped humans. Counselor within 48 hours, carbon cap.
We can still begin again. Listen to our
people are very concerned about the climate.
Yes, and I think here is a very important question. So here there's concern, and that can be differentiated from anxiety. So if we think of concern being, oh, what do I need to do? That's very different than anxiety, which is, oh no, things are going south pretty quickly. That oh no makes it harder for us to actually take that energy and use it productively for the concern and to actually move into action to help.
And so for young people, as the writer asked, for young people who are anxious about the climate and the future of the world and maybe feel like there's not a lot they can do individually, what are some ways to work through that?
Yes, I'd say the place to start is just to recognize that anxiety is kind of like a fossil fuel. It burns not very cleanly, and when we can take that and find a mental renewable fuel, where we convert that into concern, that actually frees up that energy. That's really the first place to start, because if we're anxious, we can get into a place where we're paralyzed and ironically doing even less than we can.
We also got this email from Anne who says, I've experienced terrible anxiety since the pandemic began. I'm a professor who wears a shield and mask when teaching, and I get short of breath and worry about contracting COVID, even though we are taking monumental precautions. I also would like to hear about how to deal with anxiety when one lives alone and is older, since I fall into that category. Even though I tell myself I will be fine, I am frightened at times and think and worry about death. And Judd, I would love to hear you respond to Anne's concerns there, but also hear you talk about how our feelings of anxiety may change over time as we age.
Yes, boy, this is not a small topic. So just to try to touch on some highlights here. So one, the world is constantly changing, as we talked about with the environment. Our bodies are constantly changing as we age, and so we can. Our brains don't like change, and so the more change happens and we resist that change, the more we can get anxious about that. So here we can start to learn whatever it is whatever we're working with, we can start to learn to notice that resistance to change, and we can start to work with the resistance itself. And we can also notice if it's spinning out into anxiety and work with the anxiety.
We got this tweet from Mike who says, I'm a therapist in Michigan. I often find myself having conversations with my clients where I'm explaining to them the reality that anxiety is not inherently a terrible thing. Discomfort and anxiety can tell us a lot of useful information. It's how we cope with it. I'd love to hear from both of you on this. Joseph, what's your perspective? Mike says he tries to get his clients to think of anxiety as not being inherently bad.
Yeah, there was a point, I'm not sure that this is still true today, but there was a point when anxiety automatically meant a bad thing. And I'm sorry, that avoidance and anxiety typically meant something really bad in the therapeutic community. But I think now there's a recognition that there's good anxiety, good avoidance, and bad anxiety and avoidance. You know, if you are someone with panic disorder and you avoid going out in the world in order to prevent having panic triggered, then you're never going to be exposed to what's safe and what's not, and therefore that would be considered a kind of bad avoidance. But there's good avoidance where you use it to actively cope and engage with the environment and modulate how you respond to it. And so those are behavioral strategies, but also we have mental strategies such as those that Jed was talking about in his way to sort of metacognitively change the way habits are controlled by the brain.
I also want to pull something out of this tweet Mike sent about discomfort. And, you know, if anxiety is something that our brain uses to help us figure out whether or not a situation is dangerous, where is that line, Judd, between learning to be comfortable with a certain level of discomfort, but also listening when your brain is saying, this is not safe?
Yes. Well, I'd love to hear what Joseph has to say about this, because this, I think, goes back to what the amygdala's prime function is, which is to determine, get us to pay attention and ask, hey, is there danger out there? And so that fundamental mechanism is really helpful. And if it gets us to look around and say, hey, am I actually in danger right now? Rather than getting caught up in anxiety, which is fear of the future. Could I be in danger? Those are two very, very different things. The present moment versus something that could go way, way off down down the road in the future.
Joseph, your thoughts?
Yeah, so, you know, my view of fear and anxiety is that fear is a reaction to an immediately present stimulus, whereas anxiety, as Jed said, is a worry about the future. But, you know, these are not separate things really, because let's say you're walking through the woods and all of a sudden you find yourself with a snake at your feet. Oh, of course, you're afraid something's going to happen. But that quickly turns into a worry about, will it happen? You know, if the snake bites you, is it poisonous? If it's poisonous, can you get to some place that has an antidote? Will it work? What happens to my family if I die? So almost instantaneously, the state of fear, that immediate moment of, you know, something bad happening, turns into a worry about what's going to happen. And the same is true of anxiety. So once you're anxious about something, you start to see triggers for that anxiety out in the world. And when you encounter those triggers, that elicits fear, which then morphs into anxiety again. So it's like a vicious cycle in two directions.
We're talking to neuroscientists Dr. Judson Brewer and Joseph Ledoux. Here is a tweet we got from Guy who says, I lost my job 2 weeks ago and have no idea what the future holds. I've always suffered from anxiety, with doctors reluctant to treat due to my cannabis consumption. Any advice? And we should say that, Guy, you should, of course, tweet your own medical professionals for medical advice. But, Judd, I do want us to get into ways we can approach anxiety. And one of the things you talk about is approaching it like a habit. Explain what that means.
Yes. So if we think of any habit forming through, three key elements: a trigger, a behavior, and a result. This goes back to the basic fear learning. If we hear some rustling in the bushes, there's the trigger, and then we run away. There's the behavior. The reward could be, if that was a dangerous, if there's a snake or whatever, we don't get bitten by the snake. In the same way, if we approach anxiety, as a habit. So anxiety is the trigger. The behavior is, worry or, avoidance or whatever. We can start to ask ourselves, what am I getting from that? And then, as I mentioned earlier, we can start to unwind that cycle where the worrying just feeds back and makes us more anxious, which then feeds forward and makes us more worried. We can learn to notice the worry, and we can actually bring in something, our brain is always looking for things that are more rewarding. So we give it what I think of as the bigger, better offer. So in the moment that we're anxious, we can either worry, oh no, or we can get curious. Oh, what does this anxiety feel like in my body right now? And what that curiosity helps us do is two things. One, it helps us step out of that cycle of worry because it feels better than worrying. But it also helps us see that anxiety, this fear of the future, is made up of physical sensations. It's made up of thoughts and emotions, and that we're not actually in danger right now. So it can help us free up those learning mechanisms to avoid danger in the present moment, learn to avoid danger in the future, but not worry about danger in the future. And long story short, we studied this. My lab at Brown found that we could get a 67% reduction in anxiety with training people, even through an app, to help them learn to work with these cycles of worry and avoidance.
That's Dr. Judson Brewer. He's a psychiatrist, neuroscientist, and executive medical director at ShareCare. That's a health and wellness platform. He's also the author of Unwinding Anxiety. New science shows how to break the cycles of worry and fear to heal your brain. Also with us, Joseph Ledoux, a professor of neuroscience and psychology at NYU and director of the Emotional Brain Institute at NYU. He's also the author of Anxious, Using the Brain to Understand and Treat Fear and Anxiety. Thanks to you both. Today's producer was Haley Blassingame. This program comes to you from WAMU, part of American University in Washington, distributed by NPR. I'm Jen White. Thanks for listening. We'll talk more soon. This is what happened.
This one. All right.
This message is from NPR.
That was easy enough. All right, that was my anxiety episode I wanted to listen to. Personally, as somebody with massive experience, I was diagnosed bipolar, manic depressive in college, and then I've been prescribed a handful of the things and tried a handful of the ways. So I prefer myself things like this. I prefer doing a little stretching. A lot of time in the woods with the dog is very therapeutic, away from people, and stretching and meditation, a lot of pot, but and days off too. Days off. Don't go every day full stream. You gotta take a day for yourself. Can't have every day be from morning to night, burning the candle, burning the stick. Gotta take time for yourself. Can't overexert yourself. All the many mantras of trying to stay out of anxiety. Everybody finds their own way to deal with it. So I'm not going to pretend that I've got it figured out. I've accepted it. I've looked at it in the face, and I know how to deal with it when I get it now, mostly. Sometimes it's unacceptably out there, so I can't slow it down. But most times I know how to deal with it. So just got to take it every battle, right? Every battle. So this next episode, while I finish my light workout here, this next episode is all you need to know about crypto. NPR need to feel like they needed to do a monthly or weekly. I can't remember what I heard today. I heard it when I was taking the puppy to the dog park, and we try to go every time I have a day off. So I heard them talking. They're going to do a regular installment of crypto because everybody needs to know now. It's not going away. That's what they finally admitted.
Our sponsor with a new it's too speculative. As always, the question is, what's your tolerance for risk? At my age, the answer is low. I invested $800 worth of Crow. That is Crypto.com's coin. Turned into $8,000 once the LA Staples Center changed their name to Crypto.com Center. Awesome.
At some point, you've probably been told to never invest in something you don't understand. That hasn't stopped many from going all in on crypto. For a moment last year, the cryptocurrency market was worth more than $3 trillion.
Most people don't completely understand the stock market. They don't understand 401ks. Most people don't understand fucking anything about investing. So that is just elitist NPR bullshit or something. I don't know. I was a fan of NPR 15 years ago, 10 years ago or something, but I took a handful of years off and now it just makes me mad. So that's why we do this, because I can get a little information out of it, but also critique. It's fun. Yeah, so I'm going to finish this bowl, finish my drink, and then we'll finish my workout.
And this year, the message from Crypto Boosters is clear. What are you waiting for?
Gentlemen, have you taken leave of your senses? The people shall have the right to vote. Even the stupid ones? Yes. Stupid people vote? Yes. Hey, Captain, what's cooking? We're putting a man on the moon. Are you out of your mind? I can't even get tuna without celery. Nobody's going to the moon, ever.
Like I was saying, it's FTX. It's a safe and easy way to get into crypto.
I don't think so. And I'm never wrong about this stuff. Never.
But let me put it this way. Some of you aren't buying.
From what I understand, it's pretty much locked up secret transactions between you and whoever you're transacting with. So the government doesn't have a way to see what you're doing. The IRS doesn't have a way to see what you're doing. Law enforcement doesn't have a way to see what you're doing. And it just sounds like an excellent recipe for the downfall of government as we know it, everywhere.
That's not true.
That's Alan, who called us from Vermont. And we know many more of you have a take on crypto, including its impact on the environment. And we'll get to that a bit later in the hour. But digital currencies are here. They're being sold hard. But is crypto a safe space for you to take a gamble with your money? We'll get into all that and more after the break. I'm Jen White. You're listening to the 1A podcast, where we get to the heart of the story. A reminder to have your questions answered on future topics.
With over 25 years of developing trust, or learn more.
Nationally public funded radio with so many ads, they drive your fucking head nuts. Pretty sure I have a maturity thing on this all the time, right? Jesus. So ridiculous. So fucking ridiculous, NPR. Owned by the Koch brothers and Bill Gates, and still need to advertise for some fucking reason. They don't need your money. Don't give them money.
At provenwinnerscolorchoice.com.
Don't give them your money.
NPR.
Don't do
This
it.
message comes from NPR sponsor Saatva, the comfort company. Saatva luxury mattresses are sold online and priced at about 50% less than mattress stores. Visit SAATVA.
Life Kit is in your feeds with episodes on health.
People are hardwired to connect with others, which is why this whole time is so difficult. The connection that happens between people can be very powerful, and how healing it can be to have a healthy relationship with someone.
To get matched with a counselor within 48 hours and save 10%, go to betterhelp.com.
So difficult. The connection that happens from NPR sponsor UKG. UKG. Our purpose.
We're discussing cryptocurrency and answering your questions. Joining us now is Katie Martin. She's markets editor for the Financial Times, and she joins us from London. Katie, welcome to 1A.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And closer to home, joining us from Washington, D.C., is writer and economist Ishvar Prasad. His latest book is called The Future of Money, How the Digital Revolution is Transforming Currencies and Finance. He's also a senior professor at Cornell University. Ishvar, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jen. It's great to be part of this discussion.
So I think, like Cher here on Twitter, who says, I'm at a loss about the basics of crypto. Most of us would struggle to concisely describe what we mean by cryptocurrency. So Ishvar, please keep it simple. What exactly are we talking about?
You know, Jen, in finances and everything else, timing is everything. In 2009, as you may remember, when we were going through the global financial crisis, trust in governments and commercial banks was at an all-time low. So that was exactly when Bitcoin came along, and it provided the promise of...
Does anybody think that trust in banks are super good right now? Does anybody think that trust in banks are super fucking high right now? He made it sound like that's a thing of the past. It's not a thing of the past. It's still a thing. Oh, man. It's still a thing. Absolutely still a thing. Yeah. The phone will just let me play it.
Being able to conduct financial transactions without relying on central bank money, the dollars that we have in our billfolds, or using a credit card or bank account, and to be able to do so using only our digital identities, not our real identities. So at some level, this was a mind-boggling promise, and remarkably, Bitcoin delivered. But it turned out ultimately that Bitcoin was not as good as people had thought at what it had promised. It turns out it's a very unstable valued medium of exchange, so it doesn't work very well for transactions. It also turns out it doesn't give you as...
Okay, even with everybody battling it, all the World Bank, the freaking the major banks, it's still doing pretty well, and nobody thought it was going to be stable by this point. We thought it'd be stable by like 2025, 2030. Nobody ever thought it'd be stable by this point, you fucking idiot. I hate conspiracy, but I also hate propaganda.
Anonymity as it had promised, but what has happened is that Bitcoin has set off a revolution whereby you can actually conduct transactions using other types of cryptocurrencies. And even though cryptocurrency has this weird notion of things being very secret, in fact, it's not. What Bitcoin works as a result of is something that I think of as radical transparency. Every transaction ever undertaken using Bitcoin and the digital identities of all the transacting parties are all posted on these digital ledgers that are maintained on multiple computers around the world that are synchronized in real time. And that transparency and that multiplicity of computers on the network is what makes things secure. It makes it resilient and actually suggests that you can conduct transactions without trusted intermediaries. So whatever happens with Bitcoin, and I don't think it will last as a speculative asset, which is basically what it's become, because it's not serving as a medium of exchange. But the technology that Bitcoin has bequeathed to us, I think, is going to be transformative in finance.
Well, I want to make sure we're clear here. Bitcoin is a type of cryptocurrency in the same way people may say Kleenex when they're referring to any type of tissue. But Katie, explain really just the basics of cryptocurrency and blockchain, because those are important to understand as well.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, Bitcoin is only one of thousands of these coins. There are all sorts. Some of them have got named after stupid little jokes or swear words or dogs that belong to Elon Musk, the founder of Tesla, or whatever it is. There has just been this huge proliferation, which is probably not what the original architects of Bitcoin had in mind when they pulled this thing together. But yeah, all of the transactions, as Ishwa was saying, they're all they're ultimately trackable on the blockchain. There's this new form of technology that some people, not everybody, but some people think is a really great way to actually do trade, to buy and sell goods and services around the world.
Also, it'd be a fantastic way for like elections to happen, which Venezuela approved like 6 years ago, just so we know.
And to be able to track products around the world. But really why this is blowing up now is precisely because there are just so many thousands of these coins kicking around. And what everybody wants to do is to do the same as what happened with Bitcoin, right? If you were one of the early believers in Bitcoin, then you've made a fortune out of this. And what if I can be one of those lucky individuals that can get in on the ground floor of any one of these huge number of other coins that are out there? And that brings with it enormous potential for people who get it right, but also obviously massive potential personal financial losses to people who get it wrong.
And so is there an actual asset that's backing these pieces of information, or is it just about trust?
So, again, remember, they could be talking about the Ponzi scheme called Wall Street, or they could be talking about crypto. Both assets are equally unbacked. Both assets are equally speculative. And that is just complete propaganda bullshit. All right.
It's just about trust. So ultimately, when coins are created, then the coins are effectively, they're not physical coins. You can't really hold them into your hand. You don't dig a piece of metal out of the ground or anything like that. It's a line of code that is effectively worth however much the next person who comes along is prepared to buy it off you for. That's it. It's not really a currency as we would normally understand it. It's not something that you can easily just pop down to the coffee shop and get your morning brew. You can't go to the supermarket and do your weekly shop. You can't normally pay your taxes with these things. They are lines of code that some people believe is worth something, and there's enough people now who believe that they're worth something.
There's enough people now that think that they're worth something, that they are currently have ATMs all over the place. So if you want to get groceries, you can stop at ATM and get groceries. There are currently realtor companies, there are currently mortgage companies, there are currently all sorts of clothing lines and backpacking and camping gear and even Tesla. And I mean, okay, so you can buy almost anything with it now. Bitcoin and altcoins. There are currently, I believe Dash is used in the Philippines. I believe Litecoin is used in Thailand or some shit. Like, I mean, that's not true. She's just glossing over shit and taking it from a Wall Street perspective. She's not asking a crypto enthusiast. She's not asking anybody that knows anything.
Value of a lot of these lines of code has gone up. Really, possibly the better way to think about these crypto assets, and a lot of central bankers are very fixed on referring to them as crypto assets rather than cryptocurrencies, is they're not currencies like we would normally expect them to behave. They are effectively products. And think of them as collectibles, as little trinkets that some people just want to collect for whatever reason. And they change hands for whatever price the market for people who believe in these trinkets think they're going to be worth. So the price is
just like Wall Street. Exactly like Wall Street. She's describing Wall Street right now, right? Because that's exactly what stocks are. Tesla stock doesn't. If you go into Tesla and go, I have a stock, they'll go, good for you, because if the company crashes, that's worth like 43 cents or 53 cents or some shit. It's not worth thousands of dollars. It's not brick and mortar.
Extremely volatile. It's subject to all sorts of disruptive factors that other types of financial markets are not subject to. And they really are just worth as much as the next person thinks they are.
Ishvar, you argue that for money to work, we have to trust that it will work. But to what extent are there?
Just like the dollar and stocks. Everything she just said could have been applied to dollars or stocks. Fucking NPR.
Actual guarantees with crypto?
There are none. The reality here is, as Katie suggested, it's largely built on investors' faith. Now, one might think that if something has intrinsic value, in other words, if you can actually use it as a medium of exchange for conducting transactions or something of the sort, then something might have value. But the reality is that these decentralized cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, where decentralized essentially means that there is no agency or institution that is behind the issuance or management of those currencies, those are really being born on investors' faith and the notion that these are going to be scarce. And that I don't think is really a durable source of value in the long term.
I want to bring another voice into the conversation. Sam Bankman-Fried is the CEO and co-founder of the FTX Crypto Exchange. Sam, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So what impact do you think exchanges like yours are having on banks and financial systems around the world?
So far I think the impact has been fairly muted, but I think that there might be pretty large impact over the next decade or so. And I think the biggest thing is being able to provide equitable access to financial services that really has not been an opportunity for the underbanked in the United States and globally, especially in jurisdictions that do not have strong fiat systems.
Now, in December, you were part of a congressional hearing held in Washington. Lawmakers wanted to hear more about the role of regulators in cryptocurrency. Brian Brooks, CEO of Bitfury, that's a firm that helps support the blockchain, had this to say.
We already have a regulatory system. The laws are super clear how it works. But there's something about crypto that scares people. Don't know what it is. Maybe it's just because it's new. But I remember in my banking law class when banks were first allowed to use computers to keep ledgers. People sued over that at the time. But it seems like we haven't really learned the underlying lesson, which is technology usually advances human flourishing. We have a regulatory system. Let's use it.
Again, that's Brian Brooks, CEO of the BitFury Group, and he's worked both for the government and the private sector, making the case for why new rules aren't needed. But Sam, I'm curious to hear from you what role you think regulators should play.
Yeah, I think regulators should play an active role in overseeing the digital asset industry the same as they do for other industries. I think to some extent you can apply current laws to the crypto industry. I think especially when you look at things like, anti-money laundering laws and, anti-market manipulation laws. I think many of those just port over pretty cleanly to the digital asset industry. I think for some things around clearing and custody, there needs to be some tweaks, and regulators need to be able to take the principles of the current regulatory framework but apply them to a different technology stack. But overall, I think there does need to be federal oversight in order to protect consumers and protect against systemic risk.
Now, you reminded Congress that 95% of crypto trading volume occurs actually offshore. Your own company operates out of the Bahamas. But what's the risk of that reputation you're trying to build for FTX, that it could get blown up by a rogue actor or tainted by the known criminality that is taking place in this space?
I think it's really important that we are, both compliant with regulations as they exist, but also that we're able to police our own exchange even in the absence of regulation. And so, the way that we think about it is, look, we have a global mandate to prevent money laundering from happening on our platform, to prevent financial crimes, to prevent manipulative activities on our markets. That's true whether or not there are regulations around it. In some jurisdictions, there are some sets of regulations, there are others in other jurisdictions. That doesn't change what our responsibility and our mandate is. And I think you're exactly right that, it is incumbent upon us to ensure that our platform is, being used to give equitable financial access, not to facilitate financial crimes.
We've heard from a lot of our listeners that they...
All right. Out of this episode, I am not an expert on health. I'm just doing a little stretching after work. I'm not an expert on crypto. I do have anxiety. I'm not an expert on it, but I'm pretty damn good at handling my life now. Staying away from caffeine, the all-natural workout supplements, not those high sugar, high caffeine ones, or especially the high sugar ones. They mess with your body, man. Natural. Try to keep things natural. If you're hungry, eat small meals and a lot of freaking water. All right. Let's keep going.
Concerned about getting involved in crypto because of the impact on the environment. And is this something your company is trying to address?
Absolutely. So first of all, 80% of the transfers that happen, in and out of FTX use extremely energy efficient proof of stake blockchains that have effectively no climate impact. For the minority that do use more carbon intensive proof of work transfers, we both buy bulk carbon offsets, but also invest equally in carbon removal technology and other R&D to try and combat climate change. And we're also helping to build out and support the energy efficient methods in the crypto industry, and encouraging miners to switch to renewable energy sources.
I want to circle back to something you said about the unbanked and how you think this is an opportunity for people who have traditionally been unbanked to have access to some form of banking. But cryptocurrency, as I understand it right now, is really based on this idea of investing in something, buying something. So how would that work?
Yeah, so if you think about what access the traditional investor has, either to banks or to investments, it is actually quite difficult. You usually go through 10 different intermediaries if you're trying to buy a stock in the United States, between the brokerages, the thought firms, the dark pools, the clearing, the custody, ultimately the exchange. And what this means is that the access that the traditional investor has looks nothing like the access that a high frequency trading firm has to financial markets. On FTX and in crypto in general, all users have exactly the same access. The platform, they can do a straight to matching engine without further intermediation. So I think that's one piece of it. And I think the other piece is, especially when you look internationally, a lot of people do not have access to a stable fiat currency with a bank account that works for them, and will, not freeze their assets if they want to speak their mind politically. I think in a lot of countries this has become a larger problem. And I think more generally that it's actually quite difficult to maintain functional bank accounts for a lot of people when you look at, overdraft fees that are charged because the bank is too slow to process transactions that are taking, 3 days to hit the user's account. And so being able to return that actual direct access to users to, not just investing and trading, but but also to their.
I'm gonna give it to NPR. At least they brought, like, they had the freaking Wall Street assholes for the first third, but at least they brought on an actual crypto person for the middle here. So thank you for at least trying, because so many people don't. So many people just, here's two opinions. They're both the same. They're both the ones we want you to hear. News has not been fair and balanced. No mainstream media is. So if you think yours is, if it's on TV, it's not.
Well, you can store dollars on crypto platforms.
They just took the only one off TV that was even close. That let people say what they wanted and pick people from both sides, and that was RT. We just took it off of here. So that's what we do.
Direct access to it yourself. Right. You can spend from it. You can earn interest on it. All in a with a lot more control than you get through most bank accounts.
Well, again, Washington is paying your company close attention. FTX was valued at $32 billion earlier this month. If we speak to you this time next year, what would be one big policy change you'd hope to see regarding regulation?
I think there's a few things. I think one of them is clarity around the federal oversight of spot cryptocurrency markets, many of which currently fall in a void between the CFTC and the SEC. I think another thing is oversight of stablecoin balance sheets to ensure that they are audited. And the last thing that I would say is a token registration process that has some, analogies to current securities registration processes to ensure that, the things that people are getting access to have full disclosure.
That's Sam Bankman-Fried. He's the CEO and co-founder of the FTX crypto exchange. Sam, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We asked you what concerns you have about crypto, and here's what some of you shared.
This is Ginger in Washington State. I thought about investing in crypto, but it is a huge energy suck. And from a climate perspective, it is a no-go.
Hi, my name is Courtney. I'm calling from Durham, North Carolina. I have questions about the environmental impact of cryptocurrencies. People are thinking about increasing their assets outside of traditional banking systems, which I think is awesome. However, the mining that supports cryptocurrencies is something that we don't talk a lot about, and I think that's really important.
And Christina in Pittsburgh says, please discuss the crypto and the environment in detail. It sounds like a trend that, like others, will too quickly lead us down a dangerous road before the long-term impacts are considered.
It's weird that NPR listeners all had the same questions, seeing as that's the way they've been slanting crypto coverage. And now that they're actually doing segments on it, it might get better. But their past coverage has all been this way. Like, I mean, anything I've ever gleaned from them has been that way. So it hurts me a little bit, just a little bit. But I'm trying to stay calm, trying to go to bed tonight. Just got done with a little 40-minute stretch and workout. So now it's time to slowly breathe and do a little meditation, a little breathing, and we'll get into the second half of the show with another bowl, but right now, let's get done with NPR, huh?
Ishvar, first, just when we talk about mining and crypto, what are we talking about specifically?
So in 1999, a decade before Bitcoin came along, my Cornell colleague Ari Jewels devised this method of validating transactions called proof of work. That was adopted by Bitcoin, and it is incredibly clever. It provides people with computing power, an incentive in the form of Bitcoin rewards to undertake the process of validating transactions. Now, this is kind of important because if you have a dollar bill, you go into a coffee shop, you pay with it, and it's gone. But with a digital asset, you could, in principle, double spend it or triple spend it. It turns out that this proof of work consensus mechanism is essentially one by which you can make sure that this double spending can be avoided. And it's a way in which the security of the Bitcoin blockchain can be preserved. Essentially, people compete to solve numerical problems created by the algorithm, and whoever throws the most computing power at it has the best chance of solving it, gets the privilege of validating those transactions as legitimate and adding them to the blockchain, which is what makes the blockchain very secure. Now, it's worth noting here that this proof of work mechanism is environmentally destructive. It involves huge amounts of computing power, so you need electricity to run the computers, cool the computers. There is a lot of computer detritus that is created. But we are now moving to other types of validation protocols which are much more efficient in terms of the speed of processing transactions and don't have as destructive an environmental impact. So I think the Bitcoin blockchain is a problem. And of course, it's still the largest cryptocurrency around. The second largest cryptocurrency, Ethereum, is in the process of moving to a proof of stake consensus protocol, which is going to be much more environmentally efficient. So I think we will come to the day when cryptocurrencies can in fact be used and their blockchain technology can be used much more efficiently. But right now it is...
Damn, that's two reasonable people in a row. What is happening right now in NPR? I gotta take a pause. That's insane. I'm a little blown away. There's two reasonable people in a segment by 1A. They usually annoy me, I guess 50% of the time. So nope, all right, that balanced out. Never mind. They annoy me 50% of the time, so that balances out.
So, Katie, as Ishvar says there, we're not there yet. So how big of an issue is this environmental question, particularly if they're looking to attract young investors?
Yeah, as Ishvar was saying, we're moving towards a point where a lot of the crypto market will be powered by much more energy efficient processes, but we're definitely not there yet. And when we talk about mining crypto, we're not talking about digging into the ground and discovering something. There are these gigantic warehouses full of computers that are just desperately trying to solve these puzzles that effectively unlock these coins. And as Ishvar was saying, you are then able to validate it and put it on the blockchain. This process globally uses more electricity than Norway or Ukraine. It uses a little less electricity than Egypt or Poland, going on the latest data from Cambridge. That sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. It's also twice as much as all of the domestic televisions in the US. Now, you can make a judgment, as a consumer, whether you personally, when you're considering buying cryptocurrencies, and this is just Bitcoin as well, by the way, this isn't all of the cryptocurrencies, you can make a judgment as to whether you think that's a reasonable price to pay in terms of carbon for your opportunity to make a lot of money. Maybe it is. Maybe there is a...
Okay, I bet she has an electric car that was not made with any mining of any materials. I bet she has all natural clothes on, nothing that has ever hurt an animal, has died from anything. Like, just pick your fucking battles yourself, okay? That's what I say. I don't try to be preachy. If you want to hear my opinions, I'll give them to you, but I try not to be preachy on this issue because most people don't know it. I mean, if you just shut your freaking mouth, you don't know. Like, I'm a vegetarian. Boom. Oh shit, people didn't know that. Like, if you just shut your mouth, just okay. So
social utility here that is worth that much carbon, but it's definitely an argument that has to be proven.
That's Katie Martin. She's the markets editor for the Financial Times. Katie, thanks for speaking with us today.
Pleasure.
Still to come, we know about 16% of Americans hold or trade crypto. So it's worth taking a look at who is part of that 16%.
Yes, and it's also big investors. Wow, that's amazing. Mortgage firms have jumped onto it. All sorts of things. I'm not listening to her any longer. I'm really, really not.
This message comes from NPR sponsor.
Listening to her anymore. I wanted to.
This message comes.
No, I want to.
This message comes from.
Oh my gosh! I want to see the episodes. I saved a lot of them, and I narrowed it down to a few. And I didn't want to listen to all of them. Okay. All right. This one's from NPR Politics. So the other two were from 1A. Got to take a break from 1A, right? Like, I just can't do anymore. I pulled like 15 episodes of NPR from the week, and it came down to 2 1As and a NPR Politics. And this is usually a politics show, so I'm on Health of Stream here. Probably check this over to politics on the stream. YouTube. Yeah. All right. Just gonna switch this over to politics. All right. Going going to start off the political show, still with the last of the NPR for the day, and then we'll switch this back to regular form, smoke another bowl, and finish the show with regular videos, but wherever the fuck this reverse thing is, I'm already dyslexic, so trying to think reverse on the camera is not easy. All right, a little dyslexic, not like that. So you'll see it in my speech once in a while. Let us check this out. This is two very, very different strategies for winning the Senate. There's 34 Senate races this November. Anyone could help decide the control of the Senate. So 34 races out of the 100 seats. And I'm going to start trying to I'm going to write some names down on this and maybe do some Stony Progressive takedowns on these guys, huh? But let's, I played some of it, it's already been played, but I wanted to go back and actually give it some attention.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Moffitt Cancer Center. I just started my day with a piece of king cake, February 23rd. Things may have changed by the time you...
It's unforgettable, let me tell you.
I've never been, but I love 4 Senate seats on the ballot this year in states across the country. That means we're watching the most competitive states extremely closely because, as we have said countless times before on this podcast, the Senate is evenly divided and the majority is in the balance in this year's election. So, Don, you have been spending a lot of time in Pennsylvania lately. Pat Toomey, the current Republican senator there, is retiring. So this is a wide open race, right?
That's right. And I've been with the Democrats a lot over the past couple of weeks. But I will note that the GOP side has a TV celebrity, Dr. Oz. He's probably the front runner. There's hedge fund manager David McCormick and a former Trump ambassador, Carla Sands. And just to make it interesting, there is a Trump-endorsed candidate who's already dropped out after an allegation of domestic abuse. So it's early, but there's just been a lot happening already in this state.
Yeah, and Democrats are keeping it kind of interesting on their side too, right? There are like 12 candidates there, which is a huge field. So I'm wondering if we can kind of step back, and since there are 12 candidates here and we only have, a limited period of time on this podcast, right, could you kind of pick out a couple of them that you think are, really sticking out to voters, and or at least that you've noticed are really kind of emerging as candidates to watch?
Right. We're going to talk about a lieutenant governor, a congressman, and a sitting state house member. Let's start with the lieutenant governor. His name is John Fetterman. He's a former small town mayor. He's been lieutenant governor since 2018. I spent a day with Fetterman in northwestern PA. Now, that is, people who know the state, Trump country. There are Trump signs everywhere, old Trump Pence signs, and lots of new Trump 2024 signs. I asked Fetterman why he was there in a place where Democrats have just gotten their tails kicked over and over.
And some folks would say, why would you waste your time? And I'm like, because you have rooms like this and you have people that have the same core values and same issues as you do. And if you don't show up and you don't engage, then who else are they going to listen to?
Now, Fetterman campaigns like a blue-collar guy. He wears a Carhartt hoodie. He wears baggy basketball shorts on a day when it's like 30 degrees out there. He is a progressive, a Bernie Sanders supporter. He talks in his very short and very informal stump speech about $15 an hour as the minimum wage. And he says the party's caught up to him on that issue. He talks about broadband for rural.
I think the first time I heard this, I might have lost my voice and got myself sick or something, because $15 an hour, I think I've ranted this before, guys. I'm sorry if you watched past episodes and are annoyed by this by now, but $15 an hour was good 7 years ago in 2015. In 2022, we're looking at, 22 an hour, really, with inflation. But let's just go ahead and set the goal to 20 right now, because 15 is not working. We need to move that number out of people's heads, and with me doing NPR, my computer is going to keep blacking out on me, so I got to pay attention to it. NPR, guys. NPR takedown, last of it. Last stretch.
Areas, and about legalizing pot. That gets libertarians excited, right? And of course, he talks about things like investing in manufacturing and clean energy while being mindful of protecting and replacing current jobs in the state, coal jobs or whatever, with good paying jobs.
If we're thinking about people that voters might know, the next person in my mind would be current Congressman Connor Lamb, who, Deirdre, that's somebody we know pretty well from the Capitol, right?
Right, and he won in a special election for his House seat with this argument that he had crossover appeal, right? That he was campaigning in a district around Pittsburgh that had a lot of Trump voters. But I think Connor Lamb's sort of political identity now sort of tracks with where the Democratic Party has moved. Like, he has taken a lot of positions recently that were probably, when he ran, considered, pretty progressive. Like, he is now trying to set himself apart from somebody like West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, because he's saying, he wanted to get rid of the filibuster. I ran into him in the Capitol right around the time the Senate was voting, was considering getting rid of the filibuster and trying to pass a voting rights bill. And he said, look, I think we need to do it because this is something that our party is just so fundamental to the Democratic Party in terms of protecting voting rights that he, as someone who's viewed as sort of a moderate, has moved left on. And he also, kind of attached himself to Joe Biden. He said, I'd be happy to campaign with Joe Biden, who obviously has roots in Pennsylvania. How's that all playing out on the ground for him, Don?
Well, he's certainly meeting voters, and voters closer to his Western Pennsylvania district are far more likely to know him. But you can really sense that he is still introducing himself to much of the state. He is, I think it's fair to say, a rising star in the party. But where Fetterman is all, shorts and Carhartt, Lamb is very buttoned down. He's a former Marine, a former prosecutor. As Deirdre said, he has won narrowly in districts that are evenly divided. And he actually says that is like a big reason to support him. He's the guy who can win in the fall. And Deirdre, you raised Joe Manchin. I put it right to him. I said, people see you as a centrist. People see you as perhaps even another Joe Manchin type in the Senate. He said he didn't like the word centrist, and here's what he said about the Manchin part of that question.
He opposed Build Back Better. I voted for it. He opposes getting rid of the filibuster. I'm for getting rid of it. He opposed raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. I'm for it. There are a number of issues like that we're continuing to spell out for people so they understand the difference.
So who else are you seeing? Is there anybody else, acknowledging that this is very early in the campaign process for a lot of people to be getting engaged, but is there anybody else who stands out that voters are really seeming to be drawn to?
Well, let's talk about that state house member, Malcolm Kenyatta. Remember, Fetterman and Lamb are both from Western PA. The population base, especially for Democrats, but the population base in Pennsylvania is the southeastern corner of the state. That means Philadelphia and its suburbs. Kenyatta is from Philly. He's from North Philly, he'll tell you. He is looking to be the first African-American U.S. senator from PA. He would also be the first openly gay person to hold that job in Pennsylvania. He is banking on big turnout in urban areas. He says that's how you win Pennsylvania.
It is going to be critical that we have massive turnout in southeastern Pennsylvania. Folks want to win this race, then you know what? We're going to have a lot of people turn out in southeastern Pennsylvania, as well as everywhere across the state.
And he says he's the one who could do that.
I'm wondering if you see any, relationship here, either Deirdre or Don, between what these guys are talking about in Pennsylvania and kind of a national strategy for Democrats, if there is one that you guys can kind of identify at this point.
I mean, I think a lot of national Democrats are really looking closely at the primary in Pennsylvania because there's clearly this tension inside the party about
some original,
and reaching out to independents, in a way that perhaps Connor Lamb has done in the past and could do in a general election, and someone like Fetterman or Kenyatta who are more progressive and probably tout different issues that they want to stress differently. in terms of, what the party should be focused on and the future of the party, right? I mean, because I think there's going to be a lot of debate depending on the results of this primary and primaries in other places around the country where there are progressives pitted against more mainstream or centrist Democrats.
Well, it's time for us to take a quick break because when we come back, we're going to be talking about...
Let's take a break from NPR. I usually do that shit on Tuesdays. I'll be doing it on Tuesday. I just missed this week. Been sick all week. The streams I got were the streams I got, but I got 2 in today. I got my normal stream in earlier. I'm doing a stretch stream tonight for the first time. It's super late, so this is going to be a standard late week Friday, Saturday night thing. So we'll see if an audience is there. Usually on the weekdays, I'm hitting around 11:30 midnight. It was a much later stream tonight. My regular time is probably a little better for everybody. I would guess. All right, but let's get everything back in order here. Everything back in order. All right. All right, that's right. There we go. Something close like that, huh? Everything was moved around for the different style of stream. Thanks for bearing with me. And we will get a normal show going. Stony progressive. A little light news for the end of the night. After that, got a few things picked out for the day. Let's go over them. We can do it again tomorrow, right? Probably do another yoga and news one tomorrow as well. My Sunday interview the following day, always around midnight, except for Saturday is going to be much later because I work. All right. Let's just start where we started, I got an interesting little lineup for us. Let's smoke a bowl and go through some news. This was the only State of the Union I was really wanting to laugh at, huh? Oh shit, I gotta get all the echo back out of here. I'm not ready yet. What am I doing? Echo if I don't do this. And then, yeah, we'll smoke a bowl, hit a handful of clips. And calm down to some news. Chill out, relax. I froze. All right. Putting the headphones in, I froze. Not exactly a solid system. But we do with what we can, right? Just a poor bartender, not a trust fund baby, not a millionaire, not a thousandaire. Day-to-day air. A day-to-day-er. Got it? Alright. That's not that funny. I know. I'm not a comedian. I'm more of a story and anecdote kind of person.
Press Secretary. Cheers. I know many of you didn't have a chance to watch President Biden's State of the Union.
Whoa. Didn't have a chance. Would have rather punched myself over and over. And I did listen to a comedic take on it. And slept kind of half through it because I was sick that night. I was definitely sick that night.
Address last night. So let me give you a quick recap of what you need to know.
Police need funding, and crazy lady stands up in awkward times. That's my takedown.
Last night in the State of the Union, the president began his speech with a very powerful case about the work we've been doing to support the Ukrainian people.
Russia's Vladimir Putin sought to shake the very foundations of the free world. We, the United States of America, stand with the Ukrainian people.
He talked also about all of the...
They have to find segments that he doesn't mumble, because the little bits I heard, he definitely was, which isn't the most coherent thing to go through.
Assistance we've been providing and preparing to provide over the course of the last few months, and also reiterated his commitment to the American people that he would not send any troops, U.S. troops, in to fight a war against Russia. The president spent a big chunk of his speech talking about his commitment to continue growing the economy from the bottom up and the middle out.
In fact, our economy created over 6.5 million new jobs just last year. More jobs in 1 year than ever before in the history of the United States of America.
He focused a lot of the speech on what he's going to do to lower costs and address inflation. So he talked about how he wants to make...
I love how she has to go like super broad, because if you do specifics, then you'll find just clips of him just mumbling to himself. Like it's so like, I don't know. The clips that I've seen are not great, so she has to broad stroke and then find little clips that he is very coherent for those 5-6 sentences in a row.
More things in America and lower key household costs like childcare, healthcare, prescription drugs that are impacting people across the country. There's almost no issue that has dominated the lives of Americans over the last 2 years more than the fight against the pandemic.
For more than 2 years, COVID has impacted every decision in our lives and the life of this nation. And I know you're tired, frustrated, and exhausted.
We're in a new stage in our fight against COVID, and the president last night talked about some of the steps that he has taken to ensure that we are prepared and we have the protections that we need. That includes making sure we have tests that are readily available, vaccines readily available, and that we have treatments to treat the virus when people get sick. The president also talked last night about our duty to one another. He talked about the importance of voting rights, of women's rights. He reiterated his commitment to passing common sense gun laws. And he talked about Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, who he nominated just last week to serve on the Supreme Court.
The State of the Union is strong because you, the American people, are strong. We are stronger today. We are stronger today than we were a year ago. And we'll be stronger a year from now than we are today. This is
the change in the last year, the last 5 years, the next 5 years. It's all 0.0001%. There's no change in anything, you jackass. There's no change in anything. Nothing changed.
our moment to meet and overcome the challenges of our time, and we will.
Again, just got to find little segments that he was coherent, because he was not coherent long in that. Anyhow, that was the last State of the Union I'll talk about, but I did have that saved, and I thought we should get to it eventually, right? Did I do this the other day?
This is a full 3 months
Sure
of
as hell
food.
didn't do this. Oh, I was just trying to get through some stuff tonight that I have been missing out or wanted to get to. And, of course, YouTube is going to throttle me with 5-minute ads, which is fantastic.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, my fellow delegates, to all those who dedicate themselves to the noble mission of this institution.
Oh my God. All right, I'm done with her already.
Today we call on Russia.
She's just
As you know, I'm a
slow.
devout member of the event.
Ooh, I better hold off on this for a second. Can we even play this anymore? They've taken down his show, and yeah, suppression is real, and Lee Camp is getting hit with it right now. This is luckily from last week's show.
Evangelical Church. As you also know, devout means unvout, and I am the least vout member of the church, meaning I've never been in one, but I've heard good things about their brunch options. They give you free crackers, and they have a dude actually place.
All right, I should go ahead and set this up a bit, because I don't know if YouTube's gonna take me down for this, so might as well get ready to cut it and just go to Twitch, huh? But anyway, so yeah, Lee Camp, who has now been taken down and censored, This was from last week's episode, 4 days ago posted. U.S. Christian organizations spend big to increase anti-LGBTQ hate globally. If you don't know anything about this, I mean, there's documented evidence in Africa, and I'm not sure which this segment is exactly about. I don't reclaim to have seen this episode. I think I saved it for another day, hoping to react to it. So I'm going to continue enjoying my pipe while we hope that YouTube doesn't throttle me for showing a show that was shown on TV and is now being taken down because for some reason RT means Russian propaganda, which it really just means is people who were not allowed on mainstream media getting an opportunity to be on TV. It's bullshit that they got taken down. Let's see if I get cut off for this.
On your tongue, which I've always found is the most labor-intensive part of eating things. Although the crackers are not actually free. In exchange, you have to hate gays and think women are the property of men, which kinda, it's a lot to ask for a cracker and like a little bit of wine, you know? But I did once tell a guy I agreed that albinos were the work of the devil in order to score an Egg McMuffin. I regret that now. I regret that. Anyway, I do realize there are plenty of churches out there that embrace LGBTQ folks. However, Project Censored revealed recently that major Christian organizations, including the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association and the Fellowship Foundation, have together spent close to $250 million over the past 13 years campaigning against LGBTQ and abortion rights, according to a report by Open Democracy. Over $250 million trying to make sure 2 to 4 people who love each other very much get punished for that love. This is seriously fucked up. Some churches are using those donations people give them to oppress other people a world away. If I wanted to do that, I would pay my taxes. And these hateful maniacs with their holy hair gel leaching into their brains.
That was solid. That was solid. That's the constant battle is, you know, my family and friends are here. My money goes to a war corporation, meaning our government. So that's the constant battle I have. But you got to fight the beast from within, right? That's how I win that battle. Is I got to fight the beast from within, which is what I'm trying to do. Also, the whole point of this, I want a general strike. I'm promoting a general strike for this summer. I want it. And I think we need to push while we have leverage, right? We have leverage right now. Working class has leverage. So I'm a bartender. Bartenders and servers have tons of leverage right now. And we still have less than minimum wage. We still survive on tips with zero benefit, zero sick pay, zero anything. So that's why I do this. And I also believe that we need to end all sanctions, end all war. Sanctions are war. And that's my beliefs.
Claim they're just trying to protect the sacred institution of marriage. What? Sacred? I know people who got married on a dare, for a green card, due to too much tequila, for money, for regular sex, for an iguana famous for wearing a hat, and of course, because they thought they'd never find anyone else and didn't know who they'd get to pluck that really long back hair they have. These are all common reasons people get married. As far as sacred institutions go, I would rank Dunkin' Donuts maple syrup pickled yam donut holes just above it. And this story has been ignored by the mainstream media. Unless, of course, you count Dave Chappelle's 35-minute bit on how he has it tougher than trans people who've been attacked in the streets because his stretched Hummer doesn't have enough room for the double masseuse rub-down he's accustomed to, so he and his entourage have to pull over and rent out the cigar room of a high-end hotel. See? Dave is just like you and me. I hear the servant boy who puts Dave's pants on him does it one leg at a time, just like regular people. Anyway, this story is completely ignored by mainstream media. And it's not just about how one views marriage. Peter Tatchell, a well-known British gay activist, described this movement as Christian imperialism, menacing the well-being and human rights of millions of LGBTQ people. Christian imperialism, using the insane wealth of the church to persecute people. It's basically modern-day crusades, except instead of maces, spears, and the rarely used foul-smelling donkey catapults, their weapons are millions upon millions of dollars. And instead of trying to crush pagans and Moors, they're chasing after people who don't have the same sexual orientation as them. Wow, how far the church has come since 1,000 years ago. There's even rumors they might start allowing unmarried women to speak out loud in public. Progress.
From Lee to Jimmy.
Love your cat, but hate
That's how
scooping.
I roll, yo. My two faves. Anywho, pro-war media caught pushing fake Ukraine stories. I'm pretty sure I haven't done this yet. It's from a few days ago. Like I said, I just wanted to get some clips that I've been missing. And 3 a.m. on a Saturday night, 3:15 on a Saturday night seems like the right time to do it, huh? After a yoga stretch. Some good stuff from the week, kind of a week in review. Some things that I had missed. Super high after being sick all week. I've missed a lot.
Now, in the fog of war, the mainstream news often gets things wrong. But they often willingly get things wrong. Like, for instance, here, when Ukraine was being shelled the first time, when this first started out, that broke out with the Nazis in Ukraine, when they're overthrowing the government, when the United States was helping Nazis overthrow the Ukraine government in 2014, this was part of the coverage. This came from MSNBC.
U.S. Staff Sergeant Michael Boyd is at the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine and says that he saw a missile in the air hit the plane. He is on the phone with us. Sergeant, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can. Please tell us what you saw there on the ground in Ukraine.
Well, I was looking out the window and I saw a projectile flying through the sky, and it would appear that the plane was shot down by a blast of wind from Howard Stern's ass.
So it would appear that the plane was shot down. Can you tell us anything more from your military training of what sort of missile system?
She didn't even... Oh, no.
That may have been coming from?
Well, you're a dumbass, aren't you?
I'm sorry, sir. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with all the latest next.
Wow. So they
That's hilarious.
You see what happens. You see the kind of reporting that happens in the fog of war. Some people will report that a plane got shot down by a fart from Howard Stern's ass.
You said it got shot down. Okay.
And I say it could happen to anybody. That anybody could make that mistake. I'm not picking on her for doing that. But someone else did pick on her for doing that. Do you want to see
her current
who
boyfriend.
picked on her for doing that? Remember that? This is who picked on her for doing that. Not me.
This is my favorite moment. I might have to watch this like 300 times. I'm only going to watch it once. I'll watch it twice here. But this is my favorite moment I've ever... We watched this live. I did see this. I'm sorry that I saved the clip and was like, I haven't watched the clip, but I watched it live. But I was sleeping on the couch like my puppy is right now, so I half watched it live. But I heard this. I walked around the house and laughed for a while.
Oh, Crystal Ball's so stupid. Oh, she's so stupid.
That was when I came home sick, so I was listening to it in the car, and I came home and I was like, oh my God, did you hear that moment? That was the best moment.
That's Kyle.
Do it again.
Who picked on her for doing that? Do you want to see
again.
who picked on her for doing that? Remember that? This is who picked on her for doing that. Not me.
Oh, Crystal Ball's so stupid. Oh, she's so stupid.
That's Kyle Kalinske. Anyway, they get along.
What's that from?
They get along splendidly now. That's from when he was in his mom's basement. So,
now he's dating her.
so now there's a article in the Guardian. And they're talking about all the, even though they just started the war, there's already been all kinds of propaganda being repeated all over. And my favorite one I'm going to start with is the Russian warship "Go F Yourself." Right. So this was the first major propaganda narrative following Russia's advance onto Ukrainian territory. Allegedly leaked audio showed Ukrainian border guards on tiny Snake Island, you've heard about this, in the Black Sea, communicating with a Russian warship. Upon being told to surrender, the guards say, "Russian warship, go F yourself." So here, the The Western press reported that all 13 of the men were